Hi, and welcome to Module 5. In this video, we'll look at instruction, one of the direct services we as school counselors deliver to students. The purpose of instruction, whether in a classroom setting or in a large or small group, is to help all students reach their potential by addressing their academic, career, and social-emotional development. By addressing these three areas, the school counseling program ultimately helps boost students' achievement, attendance, and discipline. The school counseling curriculum, just like an academic curriculum, should be standards-based and is taught to all of our students. It focuses on teaching school counseling standards for students, otherwise known as ASCA's mindsets and behaviors. As you recall, we addressed the mindsets and behaviors in our earlier module when we created our student outcome goals in Module 2 and our mindsets and behaviors action plan in Module 3. Let's take a look at what we've done so far and how it all fits together. We first identified 2 student outcome goals for our program for the school year based on the student outcome data we reviewed. Then we identified mindsets or behaviors that, if we addressed, would help students achieve our program's goals. Then we created learning objectives that specifically describe the skills, knowledge, or dispositions that we want to teach our students in order to help them attain the mindsets and behaviors. Based on those learning objectives, we then created some pre-post-test questions that we can use to assess whether or not our students are learning the objectives and mastering the mindsets and behaviors. We then created a goal plan. We then also listed all of our counseling program's classroom and small group activities, including those tied to our goals that the counseling program will deliver to help address the mindsets and behaviors we want all of our students to master. This list is our classroom and group mindsets and behaviors action plan. Now our task is to create lesson plans for those classroom and small group activities from our action plan. In this module, you'll create lesson plans for classroom lessons and a small group listed in your mindset and behavior action plan. You may use our system to write as many lesson plans as you wish, but you will need only 3 classroom lessons, either 3 standalone lessons or 3 lessons that are from one unit, and 1 small group with at least 4 lessons in that group, if you plan to apply for RAMP. This is a total of 7 lesson plans for a RAMP application. We also strongly recommend that you create 3 lessons for classrooms and a small group that are tied to your 2 student outcome goals that you identified back in Module 2. You'll be able to see all of the activities that you included on your action plan, as well as which activities are tied to your student outcome goals. Those activities will have the green target and circle icons listed next to them. You'll start by selecting the classroom lessons that you wish to create lesson plans for. Simply place a check mark next to a particular lesson in the column titled Enter Lesson Plans, as you see here. Again, we recommend that you select just 3 classroom lessons and 1 small group that are tied to your 2 student outcome goals. Once you've checked the lesson you wish to create, you can begin to enter this lesson by clicking on the pencil icon under Tools. Going in order, you'll begin filling in your lesson plan by selecting each task. Simply click anywhere on the bar of the listed task to open each section. Select if your lesson is a standalone lesson or if it's part of a unit of lessons. If it's a lesson that is part of a unit and you selected this option, you will see the following pop-up message just to make sure that you selected the option you really wanted to select. A unit of lessons needs to have at least 2 lessons entered. But as a reminder, if you plan to apply for RAMP and you plan to use these lessons for your RAMP application, just remember that ASCA requires 3 lesson plans that are either 3 standalone lessons or 3 lessons that are part of a unit. Once you've determined if it's a standalone lesson or a lesson in a unit, you're ready to move to the next task in making your lesson plan. Click the box next to "This section is complete." The arrows to the right will allow you to close or shrink the task. Continue with each of the tasks listed, selecting "This section is complete" once you've completed each task. When you've checked "This section is complete," the empty gray circle will become a green circle with a check mark. This is just to help you keep track of where you are in the lesson plan and what still needs to be completed. One of the questions you'll be asked is, what's the evidence base for this lesson? This is an ASCA requirement. Because what we do as counselors should be based on best practice, the instruction we deliver to students should also be based on what is known to be effective and impactful. There are different levels of evidence that demonstrate whether a lesson is effective. You can select the evidence base that best fits your lesson. Definitions of each type of evidence are included here, which you can view by clicking the green information icon next to each of those listed. Again, this is an ASCA requirement. One tip: because you're doing a pre-post test and collecting student outcome results with all of the lesson plans that you're creating here for your RAMP application, you can always select action research evidence base, because collecting results from pre-post test and student outcomes are examples of action research. As best practice, your lesson should be supporting some kind of student outcome related to achievement, attendance, or discipline. This is the why or the reason for your classroom lesson or small group. When creating a classroom lesson plan or lesson plans for a small group that's tied to one of your goals for the year, you've already identified the student outcome you want to address, and it will automatically appear here. However, if you choose to create a lesson that is not tied to one of your goals, you will need to identify some kind of student outcome related to attendance, achievement, or discipline that the lesson will address. And you'll need to enter this here under Other Student Outcome Data. If you plan to apply for RAMP, and the lesson plan you're entering will be one of the 3 classroom lesson plans you submit with your application, know that you'll need to collect results for whatever student outcome you're addressing in your lesson. Again, this is why we strongly recommend that you choose to enter 3 classroom lesson plans that are tied to one of the student outcome goals you identified for your school counseling program back in Module 2. Since you've already identified the student outcome you're hoping to address and impact when you created your goals, you've already identified the outcome data that you'll collect results for. Your lesson plan will also need to include learning objectives, or the specific skills and knowledge that you want students to gain from this lesson. Again, if your lesson plan is tied to one of your student outcome goals, you will already have learning objectives here that you identified when you created your goal. You can keep them as is, or, if you wish, create new learning objectives. If your lesson plan is not tied to a goal, you will need to identify no more than 2 learning objectives for your lesson. Be sure to check the boxes once you've either selected or filled in your learning objectives. From your learning objectives, you'll create pre-post-test questions to assess student learning for your lesson. Again, if your lesson plan is tied to one of your program student outcome goals, the pre-post test questions that you identified when you created your goal will automatically appear here. You can keep those test questions as is, or create new questions using either short answer or Likert scale questions. From here, you'll fill in the details of your lesson plan, including how you'll introduce the lesson, how you'll communicate the objectives to students, the lesson plan content itself, activities to help reinforce the lesson, etc. You'll also be asked to describe your plan for students who might miss the lesson or who don't master the learning objectives. This is an ASCA requirement for RAMP. Finally, you'll indicate if your lesson plan is complete. You'll also have the option of sharing your lesson plans with others. Be sure to print and save this lesson plan. You will also see a link to take you back to the lesson plan menu. From the lesson plan menu, you can select the lesson plans that you wish to include for a RAMP application by clicking on the box in the far right column. If you wish to select a single unit of 3 lessons for your application, click on All, and all lessons in the unit will automatically be selected. You will use a similar process for entering lessons for a small group. These will be similar to entering a unit of lessons. Again, you'll see the small groups listed from your Mindsets and Behavior Action Plan. Those groups that are associated with your program student outcome goals will be indicated by having the green target and circle icons listed next to them. We strongly recommend that you create lessons for a small group that is tied to one of your student outcome goals. For ASCA and for RAMP, make sure your small group has at least 4 lessons. Just as a reminder, you will need only 3 classroom lessons, either 3 standalone lessons or 3 lessons from 1 unit, and 1 small group with at least 4 lessons if you plan to apply for RAMP. This is a total of 7 lesson plans for a RAMP application. Again, we recommend that you select 3 classroom lessons and a small group that are tied to your 2 student outcome goals you identified back in Module 2. So, for now, your tasks to complete are create 3 classroom lessons and 1 small group with at least 4 lessons. Thanks for watching. This is the final video and module in the Ascent level. As always, we're available for individual support through email, phone, text, or online with Zoom. If you need support, just reach out by calling or texting or emailing me at kelly@inspiresuccess.org.